Afrik Express. Today we are going to have a very exciting show. A show that I myself have been looking forward to this show because everyone at one point or another you've had an accident. If not in the house, is in a motor vehicle or something. You need to know what to do. And I have one of the experts here in Brockton from Siskin and Siskin Law Office to talk about what you need to know about personal injury. And that person is none other than Attorney Neil Siskin from Siskin and Siskin Law Office. You are welcome to Afrik Express today.
Thank you for having me, Blessing. It's my pleasure.
So tell me, what is the first thing a person ought to do when they get into a motor vehicle accident?
Okay, so there are a lot of things that go through someone's mind right after an accident, and oftentimes people don't necessarily think clearly. No matter how educated you are, you have emotions that take over because you may have loved ones in the vehicle that you're concerned about, and so the first thing that someone absolutely should do is call 911. That will alert the ambulance as well as police to respond to the scene. The other thing that's also very important is securing evidence at the scene. And that can be in the form of getting the names of any witnesses that are there that can confirm what happened. It can also be taking photographs of various things to help secure the evidence, because you want to try and capture things while they're fresh. Vehicles can be moved right after an accident, and that can change circumstances because you can have the police officer who comes to the scene arrive several minutes later. And so securing the evidence is a very important thing. My office has prepared a checklist that we hand out to people in a booklet to help them when they're at the scene remember the different steps to take when they get into an accident. And the checklist that we have, as I said, the first thing is to call 911 immediately. The second item is to take photos and video footage of the scene, including the vehicles, identifying the witnesses in terms of getting their names and addresses and telephone numbers. Also very important is writing down crucial information, such as the other driver's name, their address, their license number, date of birth, information about the vehicle that had been involved in the accident, license plate number, vehicle make, year, and model. After that takes place, it's then important, if the person hasn't been transported by an ambulance, to then seek medical attention to get their injuries evaluated further. And it's also important to take photographs of any physical injuries that you may have to document what has happened immediately after the accident. So again, it's a very emotional situation at an accident scene. People are not thinking clearly. We've printed a checklist that we do give out to people to just help them see things as clearly as possible when something like that happens.
But that would apply if that person is able to do that. Let's say in a serious accident, the person is out. They're not able to do anything at all. So what happens?
Well, that's when you have to rely upon the system. And there are situations where sometimes information is not communicated or recorded accurately, and there can be problems in claims or cases down the road because of that circumstance. So that happens all the time, where you have someone who has a severe head injury or they're in excruciating pain because of a broken bone somewhere in their body, and they can't take those active steps to do what we talked about. So in the end, it's something that you have to do the best you can depending on the circumstances. But if there is an opportunity to somehow be more proactive and to secure the evidence and get as much information as possible, that's the recommended course.
Okay. So apart from motor vehicle accident, one thing people don't really, we hear motor vehicle accident all the time, but there are other type of accident that happen everywhere we go to. So name some of these types of accidents that a person could get into that they would need to also secure evidence.
Yeah, well, in addition to motor vehicle accidents, you can have accidents on someone's property, whether it be a residence or a commercial property. There can be situations where someone's animal, a pet such as a dog, attacks somebody and causes injury. You can have injuries that occur in a workplace where someone is either at work or at a job location and they get injured. And you can have virtually injuries anywhere on the water in terms of boating accidents. There can be situations. And of course, in the setting of a hospital where you have an accident committed by a physician, that's known as medical malpractice.
Yes, that's another one that happens most of the time. People don't really know what to do because you're looking at it, say, okay, this is a doctor. I don't want to rock the boat because it's my doctor, but an injury occurred from a mistake from either the nurse or somebody who is taking care of you. So in this situation, what should someone do?
Well, someone who's involved in a situation where they believe there may be medical malpractice, usually the first course of action to take is to see another physician who can validate what's going on and whether or not they believe something was below the standard of care. And a lot of people can imagine that the doctor did something wrong, but it doesn't really, it isn't established unless you have another physician that can substantiate the deviation from what's called the standard of care. And so the first step to undertake really is to see another doctor or specialist to review the situation and give an opinion as to what that doctor thinks. You can have an unfortunate outcome in a medical procedure. There can be a risk of the procedure that really does not lend itself to any negligence on the part of a doctor. Or you can have a situation where a doctor doesn't follow the standard of care for whatever the situation may be, and that would be a case that could be pursued in terms of medical malpractice.
Okay, there are other type of accidents that are also, that been happening a lot, like plane accidents, train. Is it still the same procedure? Do you still have to go through collecting evidence and all that?
Well, if it's a train or a plane accident, there are governmental agencies that will immediately respond to the scene and try and secure the evidence. And that can also happen in the context of a motor vehicle accident where you have the local or state police, but it's always best to try and secure your own evidence in addition to what is going to be carried out by governmental agencies. But the same process applies in terms of seeking the medical attention that's necessary, and ultimately, if things are such that there's an injury that is incapacitating to some extent, then a claim could be filed.
Okay, so let's say when one files a claim with, say, insurance company, does that mean there's a lawsuit in place already, or is just a process?
Well, that's an excellent question, because there's a misunderstanding with people when it comes to filing a claim. Lots of people assume that what they're doing is they're filing a lawsuit, and that's not the situation. A lawsuit arises when a claim that's filed with an insurance company or against a negligent party cannot be resolved. And then it winds up in court in the form of a lawsuit. But initially, a claim can be filed if the responsible party has insurance. Then a claim is filed with their insurance company, and attempts are made to resolve the claim through settlement negotiations at the appropriate time. And statistically, probably 90% of all claims do settle out of court. There are a percentage of claims that don't resolve, and those can be based upon issues of liability, meaning who's at fault, and or causation, in terms of whether or not the injuries that the person has sustained are in fact related to the accident versus something else. You can wind up in litigation on both grounds, or it can be just liability or causation. But in my practice, we try to be as strategic as we possibly can to avoid going into litigation. Litigation is fraught with many challenges and delays, and our objective is to try and get the case resolved in as timely a manner as possible for as great an amount as we believe the client deserves. So there are other options that can be explored in terms of resolving a case, for instance, with an insurance company, short of litigation, and that's called alternative dispute resolution. And that can be in the form of a mediation, where you have a mediator that sits down, an agreed upon mediator, that sits down with both parties and hears each party's side as to the facts, and the mediator then meets with each party separately and tries to get both sides to consider the other side's position, and the mediator tries to promote settlement in terms of reaching a middle ground. There's also arbitration that can take place, in which the parties agree on an arbitrator who essentially acts as a judge. Evidence is presented in the form of an arbitration, and the arbitrator issues a ruling based on that. And so there are alternatives that exist and can be explored to ultimately not have to wind up through the process of litigation.
So in case of liability, how do you determine? I know that there's a way to determine that a person is it 50, it has to be 50% or 51% or something like that. So could you tell our audience,
Sure.
because a lot of people, that is something that they don't understand. If a lawyer is telling them, this is the situation, they don't get it. So could you explain that area a little bit?
Well, I just faced a situation this morning with a client in which I was reviewing a settlement offer with him, and he was asking questions as to why the amount was in the range that we're at currently. And I explained to him that the insurance company was taking the position that he was 50% responsible for the accident, and as a result, the amount of his damages was being reduced by 50%. And that results in a situation, in his accident, for instance, you have two people that are entering an intersection. Both claim they have a green traffic light. There were no witnesses. There are no cameras to show who had the red light, who had the green light. So in the end, the only way to resolve that issue is to assign 50-50% liability against each vehicle operator. Sometimes there can be situations where the vehicle points of contact, and this is in the context of a motor vehicle accident, the points of contact can shed some light as to whose version is more legitimate than the other person's. But you run into these situations where it's impossible to tell or to determine. That's in the context of a motor vehicle accident. You can have situations where somebody is walking on property and they fall, And the issue can arise as to was that person careful enough? Should they have done something else to avoid the accident? These kind of issues come up.
Such as when somebody sees a banana and walk on top of the banana and expect it not to fall.
Well, that's a classic example in slip and fall cases.
Yes.
And so how do you know whether or not a party is, or how can you assess whether the party should be found responsible in the context of a banana? Well, it's looking at the color of the banana. If the banana is bright yellow and it looks as if it just fell on the floor, is the property owner responsible at that point, where they will argue that they didn't know of its existence and it just happened, versus the situation where you may have a banana peel that's brown and discolored and clearly has evidence of it being there for sufficiently long enough period of time that the property owner either knew or should have known of the existence of that hazard.
Now that you're talking of property owner, accidents happen in the house. What is your responsibility as a homeowner when somebody comes in your house and they get injured or falls as anywhere? What is it?
Well, that's why homeowners insurance exists, to cover those types of claims if an accident does happen on your property. And most people, when it comes to property, whether you are a commercial property owner or you're operating a retail store in your home, you have a responsibility to make sure that the premises are safe and there aren't any hazards. And as part of that, you have to warn people, either by putting up a sign or letting them know that there's something that's loose or there's a defect of some sort. But oftentimes accidents happen and the property owner just isn't aware of something because they're just not as responsible as they should be in terms of monitoring their property. And so accidents at someone's home generally don't happen intentionally. They're just situations that arise because of something that has gotten old and hasn't been replaced or has worn away. For instance, you can have grout in a front entry staircase that the grout may have worn down over a period of years, and a property owner who walks up and down the stairs all the time doesn't necessarily focus on something, and it turns out that somebody leaving their home, winds up injuring themselves because of that condition.
I see. Now, motor vehicle accident, what can one do if you got hit by somebody who is uninsured and you happen to be injured in the process? So what do you do? Well,
that situation usually comes about when you have someone who gets into an accident and the responsible party leaves the scene and takes off. And as difficult as that is to comprehend that somebody can do that, it does happen. And the auto policies in Massachusetts have coverages for those types of situations. It's called Uninsured Motorist Coverage. And just as if you can select the amount of coverage you want to have if you cause harm to somebody else, you can also have uninsured coverage to cover yourself.
So what you're saying, I had no idea of that. So that you can, when you're buying your insurance, you should also ask for uninsured.
Correct. Most people don't have any idea about uninsured, and there's also underinsured coverage that I'll get into in just a minute. Mm-hmm. But the uninsured coverage is a way to enable you to recover for your injuries in the event that someone is either not identified or leaves the scene or doesn't have insurance. Mm-hmm. But you cannot have more coverage for yourself than you would have for a stranger. So what I mean by that is, if you have a bodily injury limit of $20,000 for causing harm to somebody else, mm-hmm. you can't in turn have $50,000 of coverage on uninsured or underinsured, because you would be insuring yourself more. So when you are looking into the issues of coverages, it's important to speak with your agent to make sure that you not only have enough insurance for the situation where you may cause an accident, but also to cover yourself in the event that you need the coverage for your own situation. The underinsured component of a policy is also important, because that allows you to have additional coverage for yourself in the event that somebody only maintains minimal insurance. So you can have a situation where someone causes an accident and they only have $20,000 of insurance. But the person may have broken bones, or have had surgeries, or have permanent scars, and have injuries that warrant greater compensation. Well, through adequate underinsured compensation coverage under their own policy, they can then file a claim under their own policy to seek additional compensation if they have it.
Yeah, but it's bad enough people are paying all this money for insurance. You think they really want to add additional money for somebody else's mistake? You know, somebody who choose not to have insurance and stuff. People are not willing to do that. Really, at least a lot of people.
Nobody wants to pay more for insurance, and that's understood, you know, amongst most everybody. However, if you were to poll most of the people that I've represented over the years that were hurt badly, that did not have the ability to get compensated fairly because the other driver either didn't have insurance or didn't have enough insurance, and they learned, unfortunately, through their accident claim that they could have had this additional coverage to help them out, I can tell you that most people would have gladly paid additional premiums to have that coverage because of that what-if scenario.
So how often do you see these type of cases?
It happens very often, unfortunately. You have to have the tremendous bad luck of getting into an accident. But on the flip side, you have to have the tremendous good luck for there to be adequate coverage to compensate you for your injuries. And when I talk about compensating someone for injuries, you know, that's what someone deserves as a result of an accident is very subjective. But there are criteria that are focused on. We as attorneys look at very specific factors that are very important, such as someone's time that they've lost from work, whether or not they have any medical bills that are outstanding, whether their injuries are permanent, or whether or not they have some functional impairment as a result of the injury. Scarring on people's bodies has value, and so there are various factors that have to be looked at in terms of making an assessment of what a potential case is worth.
In terms of determining the value of a claim, how do you go about that? And usually, how long does one claim or a claim take to resolve?
In terms of determining the value of a claim, many different factors have to be examined. And that basically comes down or becomes apparent through medical records, which document the person's injuries, the procedures or treatment that they receive, and oftentimes medical reports can have information that shed light as to whether injuries are permanent or likely to affect someone in the indefinite future. Another factor that's looked at are the medical bills and whether or not someone has incurred a tremendous amount of medical bills, and those are an outstanding debt for the person. Another factor is the amount of someone's lost wages in terms of the time that they've lost from their job through the period they're receiving treatment. Or you can have situations where someone has sustained a lost earning capacity because they can't go back to the job or a class of jobs that they were able to do prior to the accident. The second part of your question, in terms of how long does it take for a case to be resolved, and my answer to people really is, if I had a crystal ball and could predict the future, I would be able to truthfully tell you. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, cases go on all sorts of different tracks in terms of resolution. You have cases where people receive treatment for a short period of time, and then it's just a matter of gathering the records and the information and preparing a settlement demand package that's filed with the insurance company. You have other situations where someone's treatment is ongoing, and so generally you want to be at a point where someone has reached the end of their active treatment to assess certain factors, and so that can lead to a certain date in the future to try and resolve a case. And then you have the situation where a case isn't resolved, time is spent trying to resolve it, and then the insurance company just isn't interested in resolving the claim at what the person's attorney thinks the value of the case is, and that winds up in litigation, and that then can take several years thereafter.
That reminds me of something. What is the role of insurance company in claims? Because they seem to be completely, integrated in this whole lawyer, accident, then insurance. So what is their role?
Well, insurance companies provide the coverages, obviously, for there to be compensation in the event someone's in an accident. And insurance companies, while they're ultimately looking out for their best interests, they are engaged in the business of evaluating claims. And that's why resolving claims via settlement can be advantageous, because ultimately, if you're to go before a jury of your peers in court, you're dealing with people that are not seasoned in assessing values or looking at liability issues. And that can be a very risky process, where you are basically asking someone to render a decision on something that they have no expertise in. And insurance companies are also interested in resolving cases because, or claims, cases and claims can be used interchangeably, but they want to, they have an obligation to their insured to protect their insured. Ultimately, the coverage that exists, that's available to someone in the event that they're caused injury, is there to ultimately resolve a dispute, a claim, against their insured, to prevent future issues from happening to that person financially.
Okay, but there's usually two insurance. So what role does each of them play pertaining to the case itself?
I think you're focusing mostly on the situation where you're in a car accident.
Yes.
And you have the insurance for your vehicle.
Yes.
And then you have the insurance for the other driver's vehicle. Mm-hmm. So what happens is the insurance for your vehicle affords you personal injury protection benefits. And those, generally in Massachusetts, it's $8,000 of available coverage to pay for medical bills and lost wages. And that's what's called no-fault insurance. It doesn't matter who's at fault in the accident, that coverage is there. The coverage for the other driver's vehicle is to provide potential compensation for that person's injuries. And then, depending on the circumstances of the accident, there also can be coverage for the repairs or the total loss of someone's vehicle. If you happen to have the coverage yourself, then you can deal with your own company. If you don't have the coverage yourself, then you have to rely upon the other driver's insurance to resolve your property damage claim.
Now, should one be talking to the other driver's insurance without a lawyer? Do you think it's wise?
The answer is absolutely not. The other driver's insurance is trying to gather as much information as they possibly can to try and minimize their exposure. And what they're doing is trying to get statements and to do whatever they can to reduce their exposure. It's very risky because you may have someone that says something that after they've been in an accident, they're not thinking clearly, and they may not even answer the question correctly. Or you may have a situation where someone is asked questions and their native tongue is another language, and they don't understand the questions well. So it's always best to not to speak to the other driver's insurance, hire counsel, and then have the lawyer be the communicator, both orally and in writing, to make sure that things are communicated accurately.
With that being said, we are going to round up this segment, and we will continue with more information about what to do when you get into an accident.